Um, did you guys have one? Did you guys go over quiz 2? Do you have any specific questions that you wanted to ask?
Not really. To be honest, I haven't really even checked it. I'm gonna do that right now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good idea. What about you, Jakai?
I've looked over it, like just the quiz itself, just to like look at the questions. So far, from what I see, besides like the first half seems to be stuff we've gone over before. And then I saw the statistical inference things. Um and I think the only question that I think I really didn't know, maybe off the top of my head, was just like calculate test statistic. Um, so I was wondering, is that, I briefly looked at the slide and I wasn't sure. I just went over like the PowerPoint. I wasn't sure if it said it there, or if it said it in the video recording that you sent to us on Monday. So I was just kind of curious about
Yes. Good question, Jakai. Hi, Togi. Nice to see you.
I see you.
Yes, so when I was doing the video that I recorded and posted Sunday, I was using the same PowerPoint. So it probably says it in the PowerPoint, but then you can kind of hear me explaining it in the background too, if you look to the video. So I definitely recommend doing that. And then just kind of another general comment. So as I think you're exactly right. The first half of the quiz is review questions. So that should be, it should feel like review for you guys. And of course it's open book, so you can go back and look up any of the vocabulary. So just take your time with those. But definitely the second half, the statistical inference, is all drawn from the lesson for this week. And the last, if I'm thinking of it correctly, the last 3 questions of the quiz, they all depend on each other. So it's important that you have an understanding of that. So the first thing I ask is, what is the sampling distribution? And that's discussed in the PowerPoint, but there's different sampling distributions, like the normal distribution or the T distribution. And something that I talk about in the video is that the choice of your distribution is based off of your sample size, so your N. So as your N gets greater, then it's more likely that your data is going to be normally distributed, which is that bell curve that we've talked about before. So that's the normal distribution. And if your N is smaller, you would use a different distribution. So if your N is like less than 30, it's the T distribution. So that's something I've kind of been encouraging you guys to think about in other aspects too, is what is the sample size? So that's an important question here in the article. What's the sample size? And then that will lead you to the answer, what is your sampling distribution? And again, some of the different choices are outlined in that PowerPoint presentation. So once you know your sampling distribution, then the next step is, okay, what is the appropriate test statistic? So I went over the appropriate test statistic in that PowerPoint presentation as well. So take a look at that. It's very simple math, so all you would need is like the calculator on your phone to be able to do it. It's a very simple statistic without giving you the answer. Just know it's pretty simple. And then for the next step, then once you know the test statistic and the little equation that you need, the data that you need to calculate it is located in table 1 in the article. And so you just have to think about, I talked through in the PowerPoint, okay, this is where you locate these different things. And so you just have to tie that to the particular variables that I'm asking you about in the questions before it, the particular hypothesis. So you should be able, once you've identified the equation, then you should be able to find that data and calculate that statistic. And then the final question I ask on the quiz is it statistically significant? And that's determined by the number you get when you calculate the test statistic using the data from table 1 in your article. And I speak about it in the PowerPoint, but there's kind of a magic number that we know if we have a number higher than that number, then we know that based off that normal distribution, that we can be 95% confident that there is a relationship between the variables. So if you just go over that PowerPoint presentation one more time, you should know, what number you're looking for there. That makes sense? Okay. Is there anything else in particular from the quiz that you guys would like me to go over? Good? Okay. And does anyone have any particular questions about assignment 2? So one thing I just want to say briefly, that has anybody tried doing a graph for assignment 2? So I just want you to know. So if you've already done like a frequency distribution, say like in Excel and Pages, you could pretty much just highlight that and say graph, and it will turn it like right into a graph for you. So some people's data might be a little more complicated, and so those were the examples that I posted on our on-course page. But like if you've already taken, say, an ordinal level variable and made a frequency distribution, like we did for the in-class assignment, you can literally just highlight the data and like hit the graph button in Excel or in Google Sheets, and it will just make a graph for you. So that's once you have your data organized, that's a really nice feature to be able to quickly make graphs. And you might even want to put some of those graphs like into your final papers as well. Yeah, so I guess yeah, in terms of the quiz, just make sure that you realize again that that's whole second section on statistical inference. It's all related to each other. I walk through an example in the video, and then also I'm also kind of talking about in the video, I talk about like what it would look like to do with a regression model. And so just note that in the article, of course, that is a regression model. So much of what I'm saying in the video, it's probably going to apply to your quiz as well. Hi, Zach.
Hey, Professor.
How are you? We don't
Good,
see
how are you?
you, but it's nice to hear you.
Thanks.
There you are. Hi. Do you have any questions? We were just talking about the quiz.
I'm not currently, no.
Okay. Does anyone else want to chime in?
I actually had one question regarding the questions on the quiz. When I was looking at the PowerPoint, I know it mentioned like null hypothesis and like alternative hypothesis, but I was wondering if you could maybe briefly explain what those two are and how they're different.
Yes, very good. So the language is a little bit weird. So the alternative hypothesis is actually what I would think of as like your normal hypothesis. You're talking about what's the prediction that you think is likely to occur. So like if you're looking at the quiz and there's like H1, H2, H3, H4, those are actually, in the language of hypothesis testing, that would be considered the alternative hypothesis. And our null hypothesis, sometimes we can think of it as the opposite of our alternative hypothesis. And in some sciences, it might be like that. But in political science, we usually think of our null hypothesis as being like no effect. So if I think that gender is going to affect whether or not someone gets the death sentence, I would say that my null hypothesis is that gender would have no effect. So in this particular example, if we're talking about, you know, sports fandom influencing how people feel about gender roles, that would be our alternative hypothesis, that it would make people support more traditional gender roles. And our null hypothesis would be that we expect no effect between sports fandom and gender roles. That would be the null hypothesis. So what we want to avoid in political science is supporting or accepting the alternative hypothesis when it's really not true. So we would more likely we would more want to just accept the null hypothesis, no effect, than claim that there's an effect when there isn't one. So that's why when we talk about confidence in our estimates, we set that standard that we want to be 95% confident. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Any other quiz questions? So just one more. So I tried to pick an article that I thought was pretty straightforward for you guys. Hopefully you find that the hypotheses, you know, are pretty easy to spot. Just one little tip since you guys are joining me here. When you're reading table 1, something you might have noticed is that there are 3 different columns. And the reason that there are 3 different columns, or different models is what we would say, is that there are different dependent variables because there are multiple hypotheses. So a lot of times what we see in our articles we've been reading is that there's like one dependent variable and of course multiple independent variables. But in this example, there's one key independent variable, and then of course we have a lot of control variables. So when you're looking at that very first column in table 1, you're looking at the list of independent variables. And make sure that when you're looking at that list, you can spot which one is the key independent variable that the researchers are using in their hypotheses. And then you'll see within the 3 columns, those represent the different dependent variables. So for instance, like support for traditional gender roles, support for the military, and I'm blanking on what the third one is right now. But just make sure when you're reading that table, when you're seeing the models, that you're being aware of what dependent variable they're talking about, so that you can identify kind of which column row will relate to the hypothesis that I'm asking you about in the quiz. So just in case there was any confusion there, we haven't always seen tables where there's multiple dependent variables, so that might feel like a little bit new. Okay, anything else? All right, well, if you guys, if you think of any questions, I didn't see any questions on the online forum yet, so post questions there and I can respond to those. And then I'm looking for everybody to have that quiz done by the end of the day Friday. So if you could post questions sooner rather than later, that would be definitely helpful for me. And then, yeah, keep plugging along. I know assignment 2 is very, very unique to everybody. Of course, the hardest part of assignment 2 is just getting your data together. So that's I would say that's the most challenging part. And then in terms of the descriptive statistics, as you guys saw from last week, all that's pretty basic math, and you can simplify it by using like a program like Google Sheets or Excel as well. So hopefully we're feeling pretty comfortable about that. But definitely reach out with any individual questions about your assignment 2 as well. Okay. All right. So I think just kind of telling you where we're going from here. I can't believe it's already like second week of April. So in terms of, I will keep reaching out to you guys, and I'll post some online lessons. I'll set up like online office hours, but I'm not going to be posting any more assignments to our on-course page, because I really just want you to be working on your final papers. So I think given when the semester ends, we have to stick pretty close to the due dates we had. So I'll be posting some more online lessons. I'm going to post quiz 3 the day that we're supposed to have quiz 3, but just like quiz 2, it'll be open book, and I'll give you a week to complete it. And we can set up a time for questions there. But just the main thing moving forward is to just be working on your final papers. So at this point, of course, as we've already talked about, you can have your introduction done, you can have your lit review done, your research design done, and as you're starting to do your data, you can start putting some of those descriptive statistics into your paper. So then really the only thing that you can't write at this point is the results. And I'll be posting a lot of videos and stuff to help you guys with that aspect, like in the next couple weeks. So just be working on writing, working on data collection. I have some feeling probably some people are maybe a little behind on assignment 2. But once you have that together, then really it's just doing a little bit of basic statistics and writing up your results. So that's definitely, I think, very doable, like in the next 3 weeks. So I would just work on, you could really write 3/4 of your paper right now if you were so inclined, and just getting your assignment 2 together. Sound good?
Yep.
All right, awesome to see you guys. I'm so glad to see your faces. I'm glad that you're healthy, and just reach out individually at any point. Okay.
Yep.
Right.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. See you guys soon.
Thank you.